Welcome to 5 Minutes in the Word, a daily devotional in the Word of God.
Derek, when we're thinking about some of our favorite characters in the Bible, Paul comes to mind for me,
Right.
just because of his influence upon the New Testament in the first century church as well, and his primarily his evangelism, his evangelistic ways, and different things like that. If you look at Acts, he's taken 3 missionary journeys in just that short book. But usually Paul wasn't alone. Who else was with Paul that we can learn about?
Right. I mean, there are a lot of times that the Paul was by himself, and you can see that in some of his letters that he wrote. He at least felt alone. He might only have one person with him, but he felt by himself. But a lot of times he had people with him, or at least he would meet new people along the way. And in Acts chapter 18, Paul has left Athens and he went to Corinth. Now in Athens, he had that great lesson that he taught on the Areopagus, and there he's teaching about the unknown God to those in Athens. But now he's come to Corinth, and he found a Jew named Aquila. He's a native of Pontus, recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius had commanded all the Jews to leave Rome. And so here he's going to meet up with a man and woman, Aquila and Priscilla. And what we're going to see about them is that they ended up working in the same trade. We see there at going down into verse 2, starting in verse 3, it says, and he went to see them, and because he was of the same trade, he stayed with them and worked, for they were tent makers by trade. Now this is really interesting, is that here Paul and Aquila and Priscilla, they had a job. They had something that they were really good at, and they were good at tent making. And the great part about this is that Paul, he did not have to rely, and Aquila and Priscilla either, on someone else to support his work. Now, that's not saying no one ever supported their work, but they had a skill set that they were able to do that allowed them to be effective in ministry. And so it says that in verse 4, it says, and he reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath and tried to persuade the Jews and the Greeks. Now, when Silas and Timothy arrived from Macedonia, Paul was occupied with the word, testifying to the Jews that Christ was Jesus. And when they opposed him and reviled him, he shook out his garments and said to them, your blood be on your own heads. I am innocent. From now on, I will go to the Gentiles. And he left there and went to the house of a man named Titus, Titius Justus, a worshiper of God. His house was next door to the synagogue. Crispus, the ruler of the synagogue, believed in the Lord together with his entire household. And many of the Corinthians, hearing Paul, believed and were baptized. And the Lord said to Paul one night in a vision, do not be afraid, but go on speaking and do not be silent, for I am with you, and no one will no one will attack you to harm you, for I have many in this city who are my people. And he stayed 1 year and 6 months teaching the word of God among them. But when Gallio, the proconsul of Achaia, the Jews, made a united attack on Paul and brought him before the tribunal, saying, this man is persuading people to worship God contrary to the law. But when Paul was about to open his mouth, Gallio said to the Jews, if it were a matter of wrongdoing or a vicious crime, O Jews, I would have reason to accept your complaint. But since it is a matter of questions about words and names and your own law, see to it yourself. I refuse to be a judge of these things. And he drove them from the tribunal, and they all seized Sosthenes, the ruler of the synagogue, and beat him in front of the tribunal. But Gallio paid no attention to any of this. And so after this, Paul's going to stay many days longer, and he took a leave from the brothers and sailed for Syria, and with him Priscilla and Aquila. Now from this point, you're going to see they're going to be at Cenchrea. Paul's going to get a haircut. And so he's going to have his haircut, for had been under a vow. And then they're going to come to Ephesus. Now, here in Ephesus, Paul is going to leave them there, and they're going to stick around. And you see down in verse 24 that a Jew named Apollos, he's a native of Alexandria, he's going to come to Ephesus. He was an eloquent man. He was competent in the scriptures, and he had been instructed in the way of the Lord, was fervent in spirit. And he spoke and taught accurately the things concerning Jesus, though he knew only the baptism of John. And so Aquila and Priscilla, they're going to pull him aside, and they're going to help him see what is right, to see the truth. And that's what I want us to get out of this lesson today. Here are Aquila and Priscilla, and there's nothing just huge about their life as far as, they don't have those speeches and things on top of the Areopagus like Paul. They're tent makers. But they're tent makers that are trying to serve God. They're tent makers that are trying to help those around them to come to the knowledge of God. And I think that's what we need to be. While we might not make tents with our physical hands, we are tent makers here on this earth because we don't know when this life's going to end. And we're here to worship God, to serve him. And I think we can learn a lot of lessons from Aquila and Priscilla. What about you, Logan? What you think?
Absolutely. I think like in the travels between Paul, Priscilla, and Aquila, maybe some of their influence came from Paul, because Paul's letter or his second letter to the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 19, for I am free from all and have made myself a servant to all that I might win more of them. So with this idea in mind, they're becoming all things to all men, just so that they can win more people and meeting them where they are. Like you just said, Priscilla and Aquila met Apollos where he was at and grew him some more. So I think that's very important as well.
And I think as Christians, that's all we can ask anyone to do, to keep serving God, keep trying to help people come to the knowledge of him, and maybe some will come to the knowledge of Jesus Christ.